Thank you for taking this time to meet with us on a lovely Saturday evening to discuss a Master's in Social Sciences from international universities. My name is Tripti Singh, and I'll be conducting the session today. If you're here right now, thank you for being on time. We truly appreciate your timely joining in. We will give some other attendees a minute or two to join in before we actually start. So if you haven't grabbed your drink yet, your coffee, your cup of chai, then you can go ahead and do that. Another couple of minutes and we'll definitely start in that much time. In the meanwhile, if you can write down for me what subject you've studied for your undergraduate degree, specifically if it was a social science subject, I'd love to know, but even if it wasn't, go ahead, let me know. And I can actually curate the conversation, make sure that I give you something to take away definitely. All right, we have somebody from economics. Elizabeth, you're going to enjoy the sessions then, because I'm definitely covering economics. Hi, Jyoti, political science, awesome. I am talking about public policy later on today, so that'll help you. Yes, we will also be covering psychology today. So that's one of the three areas that we're definitely covering today. Happy to take in questions from other areas as well once we come to the Q&A section. Just maybe another minute and then we shall start. All right, welcome new attendees. This is a session about studying a social science master's degree in international universities. I'm Tripti Singh. I'm going to be conducting the session today. And let's start right from the top. I mean, first, okay, a little bit of an introduction. I represent the Red Pen, and we've been over a decade in the educational counseling space. And our focus entirely is on empowering you with the most objective and the most unbiased and updated information from the world over, from universities across the world. So that's what brings us to this webinar sessions today. I'm trying to, my hope is that I give you so much information and I equip you with the right information that you can actually make a lot of decisions by yourself, for yourself, in this overwhelming space, which is called international graduate school applications. All right, so we're starting right from the top. You know, what does social sciences mean? You know, in India, we call it a Bachelor of Arts degree. In America, they call it liberal arts, but inherently that's humanities and social sciences a little bit mixed up. When we look at social sciences entirely on its own, you know, we're talking about subjects that have an impact on society, scientific studies that have an impact on society that are non-technical in nature. So psychology, public policy, economics are definitely three of them. And these are the three main ones I'm going to be touching upon today. And luckily we have in our audience applicants considering mostly careers in economics, psychology, and you know, there is politics there, but if it goes into public policy, we'll see. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer questions about political science specifically for your even international relations or peace studies and things like that. So let's start with psychology. Now, when we study psychology in India, we understand it as a Bachelor of Psychology, then you do a Master in Psychology, then you could potentially do an MPhil, or then after that you can do a PhD. Or directly after a Master's, you can sit for the national entrance exams, NET, SET, etc., and you can do a PhD directly. And that's your entire educational journey in psychology. In North America, psychology is broken up into the way it serves the community. So for example, if you're thinking of a degree in clinical psychology, think of yourself almost equivalent once you graduate with a license to practice as a medical doctor. That's the level of commitment that they expect from clinical psychologists. which is why very often in North America and in UK as well, you will not find a lot of standalone masters in clinical psychology programs. General clinical psychology in a master's is a very rare concept nowadays in North America and in the United Kingdom as well. What instead you will get is a PhD degree in clinical psychology, which is integrated, which means that you will do a master's for 2 years and then you'll graduate into your PhD thesis. But you cannot graduate after 2 years with a terminal master's. You have to go into your PhD track. So you're basically admitted for those whole 6 or 7 years of the program. There's also another degree called PsyD, which is psychology doctorate, which basically is a more application side, but it is still an in-depth study of the subject. So it's not for 6 to 7 years, it's potentially for 4 years, sometimes 5, but it is a degree that still expects that commitment from you to go in depth into your area, even if your ultimate goal is to practice, and it may not be academia, which for PhD, it's quite clear. It could be practice, but it could also be academia. With PsyD, you're quite clear that my goals are application-based, but still your study has to be as in-depth. This is the clinical space. All right. When we look at the other fields that I have articulated here for you, whether it's developmental or cognition or social or industrial organizational behavior, sometimes people call it forensic, educational, these counseling, these are available on the master's level because these are therapeutic in nature. They are not clinical. They are very clear. North America predominantly, and even the UK is very clear about making that distinction within the realm of psychology. So when you're looking at therapeutic psychology, then you can look at a master's degree in any of these areas. And there are other allied branches as well, neuropsych, physiology, positive, applied, which is a little more generic in nature, right? So if it's somebody who's done her undergrad or his undergrad, and then is thinking, well, I'm not really very sure right now which area I want to commit to right away, then you potentially might consider a more applied space like humanistic or consumer, if you're looking at something in the corporate space, but you're not sure what. But if you're very clear that you want to get into therapy of things, you want to be a school counselor, you want to be a addiction counselor, geriatric counselor, marital therapist, you're very clear about that you want to commit to that for the next few years of your life, then you would look at a master's in one of these areas, right? Now, I'm going to take a moment here. Actually, let me move on to the next slide and then I'll tell you. If you do look at a general master's in psychology typically, which is again, like I said, very rare, and potentially if you have a general master's in psychology, it is basically built in for people coming from a non-psych background. They don't really have a major in undergraduate psychology. They have a minor, or they have built the prerequisites, by way of studying additionally from like maybe a sociology degree or an engineering degree, and now are wanting to understand general psychology in a structured format, right? So they would do a master's in general psychology, but again, very few of those exist. But this is a typical course load that you're looking at. Now, anybody here with an undergrad psych background will look at some of this and say, well, in my last 3 years of studying psychology, especially if you're doing it from an honors platform like Delhi University, then you will feel like I've done a lot of this in my undergrad. So it'll be a repetition for you, which is absolutely accurate. It's not like when you're studying psychopathology, you will study it at higher, more advanced level, a little more advanced maybe, depending on the rigor that was already there in your undergrad college. But potentially it will be a general understanding of psychopathology. It's your gateway degree into psychology, and then you would do a PhD in something more specific. But if you have an undergraduate degree in psychology, then there's a much deeper conversation to be had, a deeper understanding of what your goals are. And then based on that, you would pick a area of specialization, typically. Now here, I would also like to clarify that, when we look at Indian universities, there are two categories. I'm just going to categorize it in two ways. One is your typical Delhi University curriculum, which is honors system. Basically, you're at LSR, Lady Shriram, and then you're doing 3 years of psychology. So all 6 semesters psychology, which means you have an honors degree. And the other category comes the liberal arts way. So whether it's this Kriya University or Shiv Nadar or Ahmedabad University or Christ, or even Mumbai University for that matter, because students from Mumbai University who are attending today, that first 2 years you did 3 different subjects. And in the third year, you did a single major or a double major. So you didn't do all 6 semesters of psychology, right? So typically it's a liberal arts kind of an approach, which means that our universities in India, the degrees that they are giving us are, from a rigor perspective, the intensity of the study of psychology perspective, not considered rigorous enough when we look and compare it to a North American 16-year undergraduate education. All right. So for students here who have studied for 3 years in an honors system, which is 6 semesters of psychology, based on which university, within that university, which college you studied at, within your college, your specific department's rigor, and thereafter your personal GPA, you would typically send your transcripts to a third-party credit evaluation company called World Education Services. And it's not the only one, but it's the most popular one. 99% of the US and Canadian universities recognize WES, World Education Services. And you would send them your credits to evaluate. And they will tell you that based on their evaluation policies, would your 3-year degree be considered equivalent to a 4-year undergrad degree in North America, in Canada or the US. All right. But if you're from the liberal arts system, then take it for granted that your 3-year degree will not be considered equivalent. Now, does that mean you do MA Psychology Part 1 and then leave? Well, many years ago, it may have actually worked. But now, when a lot of these universities are familiar with the Indian education system, the constant feedback that has been coming in is that, well, even a 1-year master's, because typically when you're doing 1 year, you're not doing it again in an honors system. The first year is general, and the second year you're doing more research and more statistics. And I think those are the 2 areas that our Indian universities do not have enough rigor with, which is the statistical reasoning and analysis part of it and the research element of it. So what happens is that, because psychology is a science, even though it's a social science, it's still a science subject. These 2 elements for Indian applicants turns out to be a little weaker. So even with a 1-year master's, you're sometimes not considered equivalent enough because you do not have the rigor. So a lot of the websites you'll see now have put on a blanket statement saying you finish your master's and then you come to us for a master's, right? Now, if you're looking at something which is in cognition or neuro or developmental, which is again very scientific in the way they teach it to you, the way you have to study it, then you might have to finish your 2 years master's and then restart your master's in an international campus, okay, on an international campus. But if you're looking at something like geriatric addiction, which is not as scientifically heavy, then just doing a 1 year may work for you. It is a conversation that you need to have with each university on your shortlist. So it's important you start now. Even if you are in 3rd year right now, and then you're thinking that, I'll go next year, the good idea to have your college list, apply next year for the year after. It's a good idea to get your college list ready so you can get on video calls and have conversations with admission officers to gauge whether you specifically will be allowed to apply with a 1-year master's or not. Then we look at people who've completed their master's and then applying. You can typically apply directly for a PhD then in that case, because you will do the MS PhD integrated program, like they call it in North America. So for you, once you've completed your master's, you can directly apply for a PhD, right? And if you have studied in an international campus, like you studied your psychology in the UK, or you're in Delhi University, and you get the equivalency, you can still apply for the PhD directly for the integrated program. When we look at the UK, our 3-year undergrad degree is considered equivalent, right? Whether it's liberal arts or whether it's the honors system, it doesn't matter. But a lot will depend on the amount of rigor you showcase in your profile. For example, if you're applying for a degree in neuropsychology or in psychopathology, right, and you really haven't explored that subject outside of your curriculum, then you're not going to be a competitive candidate, right? Because it can't just, your entire application cannot just be based on saying, well, I studied it in college, or I was exposed to it in college, and now this is the future that I'm choosing for myself as a short-term goal. That's not good enough because it's very, very competitive. So the stronger your profile, the stronger the rigor of your demonstrated interest in your subject, in your profile, the higher your chances of being selected for a competitive admit in the UK, in Europe, and other countries which will accept your 3-year degree, right? If anybody is considering Australia, do leave a question for me in the Q&A box, and I will address Australia specifically for you in the Q&A section of the conversation. I'm going to move from here now to public policy, okay? Now, what is public policy? Public policy is nothing but becoming an expert in understanding how governments form and implement, execute policies. Okay, what are the parameters taken into consideration? study of public policy does not restrict you only to the government sector. The corporates hire public policy experts all the time because they want a deeper understanding of the government policies and the government new changes and trends that are going to come in, or what the past changes and implementations have been. Right. So you have an equal amount of a job opportunity, whether it's in the corporate sector or in the government or not-for-profit sector as well. So it doesn't restrict you only into saying, well, I'm going to end up with a not-for-profit, because there are also, if you could look at this table, so many concentrations within public policy that you could eventually choose as electives for yourself and then become an expert in one specific area. Right. So this was something that I wanted to highlight about public policy. It's very different from developmental economics. And, it's very different from studying international relations as a standalone, because public policy is all about understanding the creation, the implementation, the ideation, the execution of policies. Right. So it's very important that you understand that it is a niche area of study. This would be a sample course curriculum in a master's in public policy program for you. And, some of these would be these are core courses, but then there would be also electives that would be offered to you, especially the North American campuses, and US is very, very, very popular for public policy, now, as is the UK. But, the UK doesn't really, because it's a one-year study program, it doesn't really allow you a lot of electives. There's not a lot of room and flexibility to kind of curate a curriculum as per your need and requirement. But in the US, public policy, much like all other social sciences, would be a 2-year study because it is their sciences. Please remember, a lot of the business school programs are a year and a half, but the scientific programs are 2 years typically. Very rarely will you find one for a year and a half. So, because it's a longer term duration, you will have the option of adding electives and curating a path for yourself when you graduate with a public policy degree. So it could be the course, but you could have the option of adding additional electives. And here I do want to pause, and I want to explain the concept of a 1-year master's versus a 2-year master's. Very often I get applicants saying, okay, my number one priority is that I want a 2-year master's, or my number one priority is I want a 1-year master's. And I say to them very often, you know what, you have to understand what you're asking for. Right? Because when I'm looking at a master's in public policy, say at London School of Economics in the UK, or I'm looking at a master's in public policy from Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley in the United States, I'm not saying that the rigor is any different. It's not like because Berkeley is for 2 years, it's going to teach you more, or if LSE is for 1 year, it's going to teach you less. What I'm simply saying is that the intensity course load per week is going to differ for you. So for example, in the United Kingdom, your Monday to Fridays are going to be pretty much packed with lectures and professor engagements, much like they are in India right now. In the United States, you're going to probably have like 4 lectures or 5 lectures a week. And that's going to open up a lot of time to do your project work, get a job on campus, do your networking, do your club activities, pick up additional electives. Your course will not demand of you to attend 4 lectures a day for 5 days and 6 days back to back. So the intensity differs, but the rigor doesn't. A Berkeley program is as good as an LSE program, and an LSE program is as reputable as a Berkeley program. So bear that in mind. But there's something to say about electives. Now, applicants are very subjective in their preferences. Some like the fact that they have a core curriculum, which is really robust and in-depth and intense, and they don't really have to pick electives, and they're okay with that. Some don't like that. Some applicants will come and tell me, well, you know what, I really do want the option of curating an entire semester of electives if I would wish to. Finish up my course in 3 semesters and spend my 4th semester only doing electives that I wish to create an impact in my profile, saying that, okay, I have a very focused profile towards governmental policies or international affairs or anything of that sort. And honestly, it's very subjective, therefore, right? It's super, super subjective. So this was something that I wanted to share about policy, right? Now, the third branch that I am touching upon today is economics. Again, we understand economics for first economy students out there who've studied economics. We understand it only as a macro and a micro thing, right? But now that you've studied economics, that there are a lot of nuances to economics. So what universities have done, depending on demand and supply, right? Because recruiters have asked for these skills, which is why universities have designed these programs, is that they want specialists. All right. So if you have a bachelor's in economics or a bachelor's in commerce with a specialization in economics or a BSc economics, You doing a master's in economics might be like a little bit of an underwhelming experience, little bit under challenging, because you'll feel like a lot of these modules are too generic and I've already covered them. What you want to do instead for your master's is pick up a specific area of specialization. It could be under the heading of Masters in Economics with a concentration in labor economics. It could be a Master's in Public Finance by itself, or a Master in International Economics by itself, right? Because that's then the added edge that your profile gets towards showcasing to a recruiter that this is the impact area that I can work with you on, simply because this is a specialization that I have, and that nobody else can really have those skills because I've trained in depth in that area of study. Right. And if you are coming out of a BSc economics or a BA economics or a BBA with a specialization in economics and not feeling equipped to make that decision to jump into a specialization right away, and you still want to spend time studying masters in economics, may I propose to you, why not work for a year instead? Why not work? Build a stronger profile, because now you have an edge, you have work experience. But to understand your area of interest by virtue of internships and work experience, rather than going to university, studying 60%, 70% of a similar curriculum, just to spend another additional year understanding what area within economics you want to create an impact in. And this is something I can happily discuss with you further. I mean, if you have any questions about it, leave a quick question in the question and answer box for me. When I work with applicants, and behavioral economics is very popular, financial economics, but then sometimes they'll say, okay, well, while I'm looking at financial economics, risk management seems really interesting, and then they switch into the finance space a little bit. So that happens, and those are areas worth exploring and truly seeing whether your interest is in that space, or you're overcommitting and you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, saying, oh, you know what, if I commit to something so specific, I'll be put in a box and I won't be able to break out of a box, in which case it's definitely a deeper conversation to have had with either a counselor or a parent or a faculty member, whoever can guide you and mentor you objectively. The sample coursework, if you're looking at a general economics degree. Now, again, like I said about psychology, if you're coming from a non-eco background, you just have a general BCom, you have a BA in psychology, you have a BSc, and you have a BTech engineering degree, and you want to understand economics. And then, eventually 5 years later, you want to get an MBA, and that's your long-term goal. It's a great idea to do a master's in general economics, to really bring in that subject matter understanding into your profile, because you don't know it, you don't understand it. But for somebody who's coming with a BSc economics, BA economics, you might feel like, okay, a lot of the course curriculum is just a repetition of what I've already studied. Do I really want to do a general master's in economics, or do I want to specialize right away? So that's worth a thought. If you're looking at this course curriculum and saying, hey, I did BCom with a specialization in economics, I didn't cover more than half of this, then fine, yeah, consider a master's in general economics. But if you look at your transcript and you compare it to this list and you feel like, okay, that's a lot of repetition, then you've overgrown the master's in general economics parameter, and you may want to be looking at a specialization, or then working until you get to a realization of what your specialization needs to be. Go ahead, take a screenshot if you like. Later on, if you want me to go back to any slide that you missed a screenshot of, let me know. I'm happy to do that. I often get this question from social scientists who graduated with a social science degree saying, but will I get a job? I don't want to be a teacher. And male and female both, right? Men and women who speak with me, they're a little worried about what their place is in the corporate world, what their place is in the work world. And I wanted to tell them, and I wanted to do research to showcase to them and tell them, hey, a social scientist brings as much value as an engineer does or a management expert does to any corporate space, to a board, to a strategy team, to a team working like a marketing team or an analytics team, or even to a nonprofit team. You bring as much worth with the way your mind has been trained to think, and always put the human first. Put the human experience first, put the human perspective first, put society at the top of all the decisions that you're making, because the technology expert will always try and bring you the optimum technology to be used, but will not really understand the human experience the way you would, right? And there is always a place on the board for social scientists. If you have still any more doubts, go back to a panel discussion I did maybe 2019, we hosted an entire panel of social scientists. We brought them, we flew them from the US, we flew them in from the UK, and we put them on a panel and we asked them what they thought was the future of social scientists. And there were amazing, hopeful examples and stories that each one of them shared with us. So go ahead and find that video on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, and your mind will be put to ease. Where you continuing to pursue a social science degree is not going to make you lesser or earn lesser than anybody else. But it doesn't mean that if you studied BA psychology, that you have to study psychology in your grad school. You want to get into consulting, study management. That's fine. You don't understand finance and you have an economics undergrad degree, go ahead, get a master's in finance. Get a master's in management if you want to do consulting or work in investment banking or things like that. Nothing stops you from crossing over, but nothing stops you from succeeding and being successful and earning well if you continue on a social science path. It just doesn't mean that you're going to be a teacher. It just means the world is opening doors for you. You have the kind of knowledge that nobody else has, and therefore you do bring value to any team that you're going to be a part of. All right, which is why deeper dive into trends, right? Projected 8% growth in a decade. That's a lot. That's a lot, right? Your expertise goes, beyond just your realm. Even in medical research, getting an economist's point of view, getting a psychologist's point of view, getting a policy expert's point of view. Of course, those are valuable additions to any team, right? Look at the median salary in the United States from last year, as recent as last year. It's fantastic. It goes to show that there is a place for social scientists that's just never going to be replaced by technologists or financiers. It's just never going to go away. You'll always be at the helm of the human experience, and nobody can take that away from you, ever. Stream-wise, we kind of broke it down for you in terms of salaries, in terms of the trends, just for you to be able to gauge for yourself that, okay, you know what, if I am committing to a future in X or Y, it's fine. I'm making the smart choice. I'm making an informed choice. I think that's the whole purpose of this slide, that you're making an informed choice when you're looking at some of this data and thinking, okay, should I really study public policy? Does it really have a future for me? You'll always find a place for yourself in the workspace. UK and Europe, UK and Europe have honestly been leaders when it comes to psychological research, when it comes to policy. I mean, if you just think of this policy and governance schools in Europe, they'll blow your mind with the amount of knowledge that, every MP in Europe, in every cabinet has, and the effort that they've spent in graduating and then working with the government. These are foregrounds of leadership in any of the social science fields. I mean, if you're studying psychology at Amsterdam, or you're studying public policy at CMPO, if you're studying economics at London School of Economics, you're really, I mean, I wouldn't even call them the Howards of the world. They are just by themselves such big names and such big legacies to be a part of, that you'll truly be investing in your future if you are actually considering studying a social science degree from any one of these places in the subjects that they're really known for. So this is definitely something worth considering, which is UK and Europe. And I mean, look at the trends, right? The median salary is phenomenal in economics, in public policy, in psychology. Masters in psychology is always earning more than just a bachelor's degree, getting amazing jobs with the National Health Services there in the NHS. The median salary for public policy experts is phenomenal. So I wanted to pull out this data to put your mind at ease if you have any doubts of your future. If you do well and you work hard, as a social scientist, you have nothing to worry about, right? All right, when we look at the Canadian report, now Canada has some amazing psychology programs, and Canada has some public policy good programs and some good economics programs, not all of them. But even then, just look at, the kind of work that they are doing out there. And if you just look at the kind of salaries that they are paying their social scientists, it goes to show the repute of social scientists in that economy as well. Even though I can't name more than 5 good public policy schools in Canada from the top of my head, maybe 8 for psychology, maybe 4 or 5 for economics, or I could generalize it to 12 if I just include generally good business schools to consider, which may be serving economics from under their realm. But inherently, the economy is extremely progressive when it comes to considering social scientists for their jobs. And these 3 tables kind of represent that for us. Now, anybody here who did attend my webinar, my very first webinar in the series, would have actually spent a lot of time with me going into the details of each and every of these components. And in fact, I picked one of those components, the resume, in my last webinar that I did a couple of weekends ago. It was only about your resume. And all of this is available on our YouTube, by the way. So you're not excluded. Just because it's your first webinar with the red pen, go ahead, go into our YouTube channel. You can access it there. And for letters of recommendation, in fact, if you go on our website, theredpen.in, go to the blog section of the postgraduate services, and you will find and search for letters of recommendation. You'll find an entire blog that we've written about your strategies around letters of recommendation and who should you get it from and why you should get it. Interviews has become a big thing nowadays. You may get interviewed. And here is what I want to specify to you. When you look at North America, especially the United States, let me exclude it. The United States wants to get to know you in the interviews. It's a vetting process. They want to know if you're the one who wrote the essays. They want to know if you're the right candidate, the right fit for the diverse cohort that they're trying to curate, if your skills match with the others, and if you're going to be like an amazing fit to that class. So it's all about you, your story, your goals, your aspirations, your failures, your successes. Canada, in a Canadian interview is a little bit of that, but also a little bit about your subject, especially when it comes to psych, right? They want to know about your technical strength. The UK doesn't really want to know who you are as a person, all right? What they will ask you is bang on, what have you studied? Why do you want to come to us? What will you study thereafter? What is your take on Erik Erikson's ordinal position theory? Where did you last apply it in your work, for example? And, or when you consider suicide, what are some of the different theoretical perspectives that you would apply in your line of work? Right. And it could be anything technical in nature. So it is subject specific, if I can put it like that. And Europe doesn't do a lot of interviews, but if they did, then theirs would also be technical in nature. It may be a little bit about your goals, but they're predominantly going to check your technical acumen. So when you're looking at economics, you want to make sure that you're updated with the latest trends. What are the newest policies? Did the GST move work for a developing economy like India? Oh, it did. How come? Why do you think it worked? What are your reasons? Why do you think it didn't work? What are your reasons? Where did it work? So they're going to ask you a lot of case study based kind of, technical questions that they're going to ask. Oxford will definitely ask you that. And so you want to make sure that you really know your updated trend, knowledge, theories, names of theorists, thought leaders, father of XYZ, father of ABC. So you know all of that when you go in. So it's going to be a little bit intense, and the more competitive the university, the more they're going to do that with you, because they want to make sure that you're going to succeed once you graduate from their college. And that's the only way the UK knows how to do that, because making sure that you're technically on point always. The US is more about the person that you are and what you bring to the table. They won't really ask you about theories and stuff, but they will definitely ask you about your goals and why a certain college mattered to you and why you didn't choose another college instead and things like that. So they want to really get to know what's happening in your mind and how you think. Of course, if it's a PhD interview, it's a different ball game altogether. But I'm typically talking about the masters, right? But the one element of these components that I'm going to spend the next few minutes on is, talking about the SOP. Now, when we look at a SOP written by a social scientist, much like yourself, it's an SOP in the United States. It's a personal statement in the UK, in Europe, in Australia, in Singapore, and in Canada. So I'm just going to use them interchangeably. But when you look at an SOP, what you're really looking at is a one-page document that engages the reader and helps them identify your motivation, your aspirations, and your realizations as they align with the subject of interest. Okay? So if you are a great listener and you've always been someone who your friends have come to for advice, that is not telling me that that's a good enough, strong enough motivation to become a psychologist or a therapist. All right. If you are telling me that because of GST, I saw a lot of people in my family lose livelihoods or businesses went bust, and that was my reason to become an economist, or the newest RA forest metro policy is something that has agitated me enough to want to become a public policy expert, no, those don't cut it. You'll have to go in much deeper. You will have to share a lot of examples. You will have to share a lot of realizations. that are mature enough to convince them that, yes, you have spent enough time understanding your subject area, which is why the claims that you're making make sense. All right. So you have to understand that that is the purpose of the SOP, which is why don't go into your SOP beyond your first year of college. Nothing before first year matters. All right. Even if you were leading a food drive as your CAS project as an IB 11 standard student, it doesn't matter if you didn't do additional and consecutive food drives in college. But if you did them in college, don't mention it, right? If you, as a national level judo expert, had to travel to the interiors of Jharkhand for a match, and that made you realize that, the way the school or educational policies are implemented from your tier 1 city into a, say, a tier 3 city, like, or a village town as Jharkhand. And that's where you started reading a little more about the educational policies run by the central board, but also by the state board. And that got you interested in policy and how better policies could have better impact in tier 3 cities. Then sure, talk about the fact that you were a judo expert, but in that context. Okay, the fact that you did national level judo should be in your resume. I hope that is a little clear for you. So that's the purpose of your SOP or personal statement, right? Now, when you look at competitive universities, they will give you, some of them will give you complex formats to adhere to. They will tell you that don't make it more than 1,200 words, maximum 500 words, maximum 1,500 characters. Characters and words are not the same. Every space is a character. Every comma, every full stop, every quotation mark is a character. 1,500 characters, that's barely any words, right? So you want to make sure that when you're reading the prompt of the essay, which is the question that says, please submit a personal statement that tells us about, that's called a prompt. When you're reading your prompt, make sure that you make a note of what are the exact format for this university and what do they want me to follow. If there's no format given, if there's no word limit given, no character count given, then the good rule of the thumb is a 10 or 11 size font in any sans serif style. So that's Times New Roman, Arial, whatever. One pager. A one pager is 1,000 to 1,200 words max. Okay. In fact, I'm going to go a step ahead and tell you, share a secret, if I may. If you have a 1,500 word limit and you have a 900 word, really strong narrative, very impactful, to the point, crisp, no creative writing, no when I was a little girl watching the rains drop and all of that, and it's 900 words, don't try and fill up the other additional words. It's fine. Submitting a quarter page of a really strong narrative will work far in your favor than just using filler content to fill up the additional word count. So don't ever get stressed if you feel like, oh, I am not really hitting the word count. I should be exactly at the word count. No, this is not an ICSC or CBSC paper, where if you'll get minus marks if you didn't hit the word count. It's more about telling you that, well, this is the maximum that we will read of your story. Literally, it's that. All right. And which brings me to the other point. You must get your essay proofread by somebody else. You must give it to somebody who's not in the field. So that if there is any jargon that you've used, if you use language which is too technical, beyond the understanding of a lay person, that person who's not from your field will be able to capture it. They'll be able to catch it and say, hey, by the way, I don't understand this whole para that you've written. It's too technical for me. Right? You've gone into game theory and monocolistic theoretical model of this economist. I don't understand. You lost me as a reader. Right? So make sure that, you stay on point and it's easy to read your narrative, right? And also remember that when you give it to mom, dad, kaka, uncle, best friend's boyfriend to read it, they might come back and tell you, hey, I don't get to know the real you in this. I don't get to see you in this. But that's okay, because it's not about you. The statement of purpose is about your purpose of applying to that college and committing to that area of study. It's not a semi-autobiography, if I can say it like that. All right. So don't get stressed about that. Make sure it's in a language that is very similar to the way you think in English by yourself. Don't use the Queen's English if that's not how you think, but use it if that's how you think. Don't use American English if you're not comfortable with it. If you're better off with the British English, but be consistent with British English. If you're using American English, use American spellings. all consistently through all the words. Use your commas, use your quotations, use your full stops. Don't use abbreviations, don't use cause, C-O-Z. Don't start sentences with so all the time. These are filler words. Present your best foot forward. And if you can do it in 900 words in a 1200 word essay, that's fantastic. That makes you an amazing writer. That's fantastic. And of course, if your first draft is, I first thought about studying psychology when I realized that my friend's cousin committed suicide and I wanted to be there for them. In your first draft, if that's your introduction, then okay, fine, let's retain that. But by the end of your draft, your final submission draft, honestly will have no room for any creative writing. It'll all be about your here and now, who you are today as a person, how much have you engaged with your subject, and what are your realizations? How did you get to this? Did you fail? Did you succeed? What did you do? What did you achieve? What was the impact? And when we put all of that together, then as an admission officer, I'm able to gauge that the decision you're making to committing to my university and to this program of study is an informed decision. It's not coming out of an emotional place. It's not coming out of immaturity. It's not coming out, well, I had a dream, but you haven't really given it any effort. You haven't really explored your dream further, right? And that's very important to understand. That's your SOP. Happy to answer any specific questions about an SOP, should you have it later on. Now, we've put together examples for you, all right? This is somebody who is a journalist, all right? And the person says, the idea that newspapers can hold governments to account was, I believe, always a professional myth. The numbers are too big, but I was first exposed to the power of fourth estate while working as a whatever, on reporting assignments. I travel extensively. Every place I visited, I would hear similar stories of injustice, struggle. I reported it from all close quarters, okay? Impactful, emotional, introductory para. Great for a first draft. Not so great for a final draft. My penchant for writing and desire to highlight socio-economic issues prompted me to study journalism. For me, it was the best way to yield out entrenched historic biases and oppression, exposing archaic practices and emphasizing the need for change, right? Person goes on, I witnessed the negative impact of poor policy design, inadequate state capacity, whatever. I realized that the fourth estate sustained a democratic fabric that exists beyond indifferent political regimes, in identifying societal problems, and served as a platform for deliberation on policy agendas, right? We've taken that emotional bit. We've encouraged this applicant to go deeper into his or her realizations, back it more with research, make it crisper, make it to the point, and then bring out a more impactful introduction, right? The language is heavy. It's how the person thinks. He or she is a journalist. He or she has been trained to write in a complex English manner. We've written that. That's exactly how he or she submitted it, right? Could this be better? Subjective. You may not be thinking like this. So you speak in a different voice in your head, and then your voice will be different. But there is no place for filler content in your introduction or in the body or in the conclusion, to be honest, right? And that's what you have to understand about your SOP. It's very, very important. I hope I'm giving you all a lot of things to think about and seeds planted, I hope, in the right direction, right? So, we've covered a little bit about the psychology space, the public policy space, the economy space, why you should pick a specialization versus a general degree. Why is it important for you to study social science if you're considering social science? We also discussed a little bit about the trends in employment, the latest reports that we found for you. We discussed a little bit about the components. I'm not going to touch upon them too much except for the SOP. We've discussed that in details, which brings me to the question that I often get asked, when applicants come to us and they ask us, well, why will I get chosen? Do you think I'll get into this university? The answer is really simple. The answer is basically, have you, as a keen subject interest person, explored your subject outside of the curriculum? Are you, as a student of political science, have you explored politics or policy or the economies behind politics, or the developmental ideologies behind politics, or just the history of politics outside of politics? Have you showcased intellectual curiosity through any one of these parameters? And if you haven't, and if you're yet to graduate, do it now. Do it. Get into research, find a mentor. Read academic books outside the curriculum. Read research papers by other researchers and thought leaders. Get into projects. You can initiate a community-based project anyway if you're looking at policy or politics. You can initiate a psychological project anyway, just like a regular survey, to understand something deeper and then create a case study out of it. As an economist, you can create so many case studies, and you can publish them on LinkedIn, or not publish them, but write them and make a journal out of them and build a deeper understanding of, subscribe to The Economist, subscribe to Financial Times. Just get into the zone of truly being somebody who's engaging in his or her subject area so much that you get up thinking about it and you sleep thinking about it and you're breathing your subject. That's where the quality of your essays were going to come from, those deep understandings that you have. You start having opinions about it, and that's fantastic. And your opinion could be crap. It could be something that, as an economist, I would think that, okay, this is not making sense. But the fact that you have an opinion as a young, fresh graduate or as a young professional, and the fact that you're willing to share it, means you're willing to challenge your comfort zone, means you're willing to opening yourself to criticism, and that shows a lot about you. You're showing me that you're mature without telling me that you're mature. Isn't that fantastic? And if you're somebody who's working already and you're thinking, well, I don't have time for all of this, I have a full-time job. Well, everybody else who's applying who has a full-time job then has a similar profile to you. How are you distinguishing yourself? Are you doing any projects that bring you happiness and joy, which may not be subject related, but are very driven towards your self-growth? Are you reading? Are you reading beyond what you expected to read just for work? Are you engaging in research for your own knowledge building? Ask yourself these questions. This is the one takeaway that I definitely want to leave each one of you on this Saturday evening with. Wake up tomorrow and have a plan for yourself to build intellectual curiosity for yourself. And organically, you won't need strategy then. You won't need a counselor to tell you, read these 4 books. Find your books, find your mentors, find your faculty, go into their heads, pick out the book names, get those books, read them. Academic books, right? So this is the one thing that really separates you from all other applicants. Regardless of whether you're a fresh graduate or you have work experience, you'll always have scope to build intellectual curiosity, and you have time now. You're typically going to apply this December for 2023, right? Deadlines are December, Jan. So you're looking at 5 months. You have 5 months, you can start something which can at least go in your resume. If you haven't started something, it can't go in your resume. So think about that, And then another thing was, prerequisites. Sometimes you might have prerequisites. Like I'm saying, if you're a economy student looking at public policy and you're looking at policy schools with the undergrad degree in economics, there might be 1 or 2 courses that you might want to have to study, but you have till August 23 to build it into your profile, but you still got to study it. So you go ahead and plan it in your time schedule. Oh, I'm traveling in Diwali, maybe I'll do it around October, and then I'll do another one in Feb, and that's fine. But if planning it, you're giving it thought, which is important, right? Which is a good time right now to build your college list, start your college research. Another final piece of information I wanted to share, and then I'll go into the Q&A, is your standardized test scores. The US needs it, Canada needs it, UK recommends it, some of them need it. But regardless, that if you are thinking of sticking to social sciences, you're going to need to give the GRE. If you're looking at public policy, economy, psychology, sociology, international relation programs, you're going to want to give the GRE, not the GMAT. Only if you're moving out from a social scientific field of study and considering management-related programs, you might consider the GMAT. But otherwise, if you're sticking even with communication and things like that, you're going to look at the GRE, right? So that was the final piece of thought I wanted to leave you with. Oh yeah, there are also schools. I completely forgot about this section. So when we're looking at these schools right now for psychology, we've heard of the bigger names. But remember, like I said, a lot of them will only give you PhD because masters in psych at a higher level just doesn't exist as a concept anymore. There are very few schools that are giving out masters, especially in the clinical and the scientific field of psychology studies. So you may want to look at some of these other schools that you may not have heard of, but they're fantastic places to study psychology. Their grad programs are exceptionally strong. So this was for psychology. And then I wanted to give you one for public policy as well. Go ahead and take a picture if anybody wants to keep a screenshot ready. Everybody has heard about Singapore in Europe, right? But the Hurley School of Governance is fantastic. You have the Fletcher School, Tufts University in the United States, but then Texas A&M University, the George Bush School of Public Policy is fantastic. So you should be aware of these options. When you're looking at other dream colleges, you should have these colleges in there because a lot of them are actually dream colleges. Not all of them are target colleges. UCL is a dream. Erasmus, Hertie, McGill, University of Washington, they're dream colleges. So, you should know about them, which is why college research is critical at this point. You have to get into college research at this point. Economics, right? London School of Economics, everybody wants to go to, but Manchester Business School has a fantastic reputation and the economics program is very, very strong, as is Warwick's. You're looking at Toronto, you're looking at McGill, they have fantastic economics programs to consider. So I wanted to leave some of these names with you to get you started on your journey of college research, because now is a good time to do that. Because once the research is in place, you attend some webinars, you get a lot more information, and then before you know it, it'll be August, September, and forms will start opening, and then you'll have to start filling up your essays. So it's a good time right now to initiate research. All right, that does bring me to the Q&A section. Happy to have any questions from the floor. If you want me to answer any questions for you, happy to do that. Hi, Kavya, nice to see you here. Okay. Super, no questions. Should we allow some people to unmute if they just want to impromptu ask something? Anybody who'd like to just ask something, we can put you on an unmute function. Just raise your hand. All right. Okay. So some of you are actually already in touch with me. So if you have any questions, you know where to reach me. That's not a problem. Some of you are not in touch with me. You can actually go ahead, send us an email, book an appointment with us. We can answer your questions there. I know this is a public forum. Not everybody likes to ask questions. At this point, I would really, really like to thank each and every one of you for attending this session. It has truly been a privilege to be allowed to share with you a little part of your dream. Just the fact that you were here and you were committed and you listened to me for 45 full minutes means that you really are ambitious about your dream. And I wish you all the very best in your endeavor to reach your dream. If there's any questions that the Red Pen can answer for you, we are more than happy to. We have a lot of free content out there, our blogs, our YouTubes. Go ahead, visit them all. Send me an email. I'm happy to respond. I leave you all today evening. I wish you a very happy weekend. And I hope that you will achieve your dreams super soon and get the best admits that you possibly can. Thank you very much.